welcome to today's show. I'm Jacqueline Stockwell, CEO and founder at Leadership Through Data. I inspire and motivate information leaders across the world. Hello and welcome to today's show. Now, today's show, I don't have any new guests. I have Andrea McIntosh, who is Leadership Through Data's General Manager for Global Operations, joining me for a 1-year review.
Excellent. So we're doing balloons, cake, confetti. What's going on, Jackie?
So it's our birthday. So it's not my birthday, Andrea. It's the podcast's birthday, which is why I brought you into the studio, because I thought it'd be a really nice idea to kind of look back at the year of all the amazing people that we've had on the show and talk about the ones that have had the best ratings, really.
Awesome. So basically a greatest hits episode.
Yeah, but with heart, right?
With heart, definitely with heart.
And a slight Jackie cheek.
Nice. Love that.
Right, so let's get started. So one of the shows that's really kind of drawn out in every theme is around the people. And I'm really passionate around making sure that the people are heard, people are seen, professional development is brought forward. And it's just a reminder that we're actually people behind the role, we're not just the role.
Nice. So if I recall, I think one of your guests, Ali, was talking about that it's not me, it's what I do. So that came through quite strongly.
Yeah, exactly. And that theme came through with Emma too. So Emma Godfrey, and that was around her career path that didn't start in data protection. It started in customer service, dealing with human having big feelings. But I have seen that across all the podcasts of all the people that I've interviewed. None of them have actually started out in data protection, information management, or records management. We've all been in kind of service type roles before we've kind of got into the position and then just started to love it.
Oh, that's really interesting, because when we think about our roles in the governance career path, some of those things that we do, like customer service, as Emma said, it's a bit like a boot camp for getting into or stepping into that governance role. So, you learn that empathy and you learn looking at patterns, and how to not cry in the toilet at 3 p.m. as well with all that pressure.
I think I did that quite a bit in my complaint management role too. So let's look at facts, and it creates that commodity that I've been where the mess is. Credibility, it's not theory, it's lived experience.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it was James as well on one of your podcasts that we see that thing from a different angle as well. So 10 years in records management, James, I think, volunteered with Scouts and working with young people. So he's not just a digital records manager, it's that community-minded, service-driven approach as well. And I think that's really critical for our profession, is that community-mindedness.
Yeah, and when we talk to people like that, it changes the whole energy of the room. Suddenly governance isn't a red tape, it's people. We're here. We're people.
Spoiler alert, the information belongs to the people, right? So it should be all about the people.
So let's talk about gatekeepers. So we don't want to be the person that says no. And I think that is a continual theme around all the episodes that, information management, privacy officers, we are seen to be saying no. And on one of the episodes I really liked, it was I think it was with Tash, if you can do this, if. I want to talk about the no problem. So the biggest myth in our world is that we always say that.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been in my roles, I've been called a blocker, the roadblock in projects. So for some of us listening to this today, they've probably been called the same thing, and they're probably going to get it sometime today as well. That's the problem, is that whole no problem.
Yeah. And Emma nailed this in the episode that we did together. She said that you can say yes, but. And work around the problem. I mean, the goal isn't to shut everybody down, it's to make it safe, make it lawful, and make it workable, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a tough thing to do when you're in a compliance role, to say yes and not feeling confident that you've shut down all that risk. But the key thing that it requires there is that emotional intelligence. So, thinking about the people in the room, because people don't hear risk management, they basically hear you're ruining my day.
And that's where self-awareness comes in, right? So Ellie went deep into that on the podcast. The words you use absolutely matter. So people remember how you made them feel. And being willing to say, I got that wrong, is such an unrated leadership move, right?
Yeah, one of the biggest things that you need to feel the courage about is to say, I got that wrong. So doing that apology piece is so powerful. It's like, I'm the governance person and I'm also a human. And what that's going to do is it's going to build that trust. So, build that trust with your stakeholders as well.
Yeah, and you're talking about trust, and trust is everything. So without trust, people hide things. They don't tell you about incidences, they don't ask questions, and they don't report near misses.
Mm. And then we all have to scramble around and deal with that panic later, right? And then that
Yeah, and it's
just
like,
erodes trust for sure.
so the message across the episodes is don't be the scary oracle, be the kind of
Mm.
safe landing, really.
Nice. I love that. So another thing that came up, Jackie, like when I've looked at the podcast and reflected on the work that you've been doing with the participants there, is there's often that loneliness theme that comes through. You want to have a chat about that?
Yeah, and I think that is definitely a theme. So the majority of the people on the podcast are kind of lone workers, and Emma had said being a DPO can be a lonely place. And
Mm.
I know Georgina Lee had said the same thing as well. And you kind of get that feeling because it's a lot the job is massive to run
Mm.
it on your own. Having a team makes it one better, but it's a one-person team. It's huge responsibility, and everybody expects you to know absolutely everything.
Yeah, they do. I've certainly experienced that. And then people around you are surprised when you actually say, hey, I'm not a lawyer. I can't know your entire industry regulations. And I certainly found that in local government. And the trick there is that we need to keep repeating that message. We need to work together.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of echoed throughout the themes that community is not optional.
Mm.
I think Ellie was talking about community is not optional. She literally described building a network of data protection officers online to bounce ideas and stay safe. And I know Tash in one of the webinars that I did, in one of the podcasts that I've done, and they also have a community of data protection officers. So if you are on your own in an organization, make sure you get part of that community.
Yeah, it's that whole concept of the village or the tribe. So, having that village at home, but your tribe at work. And it's not fluffy. This isn't just, patting people and giving them hugs. It's about survival and it's about, doing the best that we can with everybody involved.
And I think one of the key things that's sort of draws out to me is James Powell's podcast.
Mhm.
And he highlighted that to speak to people who've done it before. So if you're in that role, talk to somebody who's done something before and learn from their mistakes, because so you don't have to make the same mistakes. So we air our vulnerability as leaders to help other people not make the same mistakes. And that, as you said, builds trust, but it builds relationships that last for months and years.
Yeah, great. So, that whole concept of the secret to thriving in these roles is don't do it alone, which is quite, it's quite hilarious because our roles are often set up like we're supposed to be lone wolves. We're often in the back room or, not at the seat at the table, but let's not do it alone. That's the key message, I think.
Yeah. Lone wolves with legal risk, right?
I see a coffee cup with that on it, Jackie.
So let's get practical. 2 hours a week in professional development. Now,
Mm.
I actually think this is very, very achievable, but others do not, because you really have to kind of make that time in your calendar and then stick with it. And I was absolutely blown away when Emma said she actually does it weekly, because she talked about accessibility, she talked about the blogs, the sort of webinars, and kind of all the topical things that she does just to keep her professional development up, which I just thought was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and that's a big thing, right? So that accessibility in learning, that creates better outcomes because not everyone is equipped to read, long legal jargon documents. So we need to make it accessible because when people can't access the knowledge, that's when mistakes happen. So making sure they can have access to that knowledge.
Yeah, great. I do love accessibility 'cause you've got to make sure it's right for everybody.
Mm.
And everybody needs to learn data protection, privacy, records management. You need to make sure you have it in different formats. So James gave a really useful professional development mix, which I quite liked as well. So he looked at training courses, he does blogs, he speaks to relevant consultants, he goes to conferences, and then he reviews the Microsoft documentation. But he said the most useful thing is just to talk to people who've been through it, which is the same thing. It's like those case studies, it's taking people on those journeys, it's learning from mistakes, but also taking that advice as to what's best practice.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think one of the things that we miss in formal training is those messy bits. It's like do this, do that, but we're missing the messy bits. And they're the ones that we need, the mistakes, the conversations, the storytelling around the mess in between the training.
Yeah, you don't have to pay for it. There's so much free resourcing out there if you want to invest in
Mm.
yourself. So there's books, podcasts, LinkedIn articles, Power 21, scorecards. There's a wide range of things as well. Obviously, you get better quality with payment of training or professional development methods, but yeah, there's a wide range of things that you can utilize.
And that's pretty much our vibe, right? At Leadership Through Data, is we've got so many offerings and such a mix of what we do. And, it's that whole learn it, translate it, make it human, but make it memorable. So I'm really proud of what we do in that space, Jackie, that it's not just, bespoke training delivery.
Yeah, agreed, because it's online, e-learning, blended learning, live learning, and a wide range of different things. And for anybody
Mm.
listening, my rule is still 2 hours a week. That's it. Put it in your calendar, protect it. It is your time to grow your mind, just like you water your flowers. Not in the winter, though.
Nice. It's a meeting with your future self, right? So you're actually creating a meeting for your future self. So I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. And that kind of brings me on to my next topic, really, is around confidence, imposter syndrome, because you'll never
Mm.
know everything. But if you don't actually invest in time in professional development, you'll stay in that kind of there's a learning curve where you start off in your comfortable zone and you kind of work around the curve and then you end up as an expert. But then when you end up in an expert, you then go back into your comfort zone. Right in the bottom of the curve is where you need to focus your attention, where you come out of your comfort zone and you grow into a Pacific, really nice learning zone, but you don't want it to be full of anxiety or it be too much because then you'll just freeze and you won't learn anything. So it's got to be softly, softly as you dip into the curve and then you go up to expert. And guess what? When you hit expert, you come back to comfort zone. And I'm saying that because professional development allows you to increase your mind, but it allows you to increase your confidence. And increasing confidence will help you deliver more and more within your organization. And confidence was a huge theme throughout all of the podcast series this year.
Yeah, if I recall, James, one of your guests talked about this as confidence being a real challenge for him. So, stepping into a role with that impact and risk, that long lasting lens on that. And he talked about the training giving him grounding, but the confidence actually came, and this alludes to your curve there, Jackie, is the confidence came when he started applying it and then getting feedback on what he was applying it. That whole, seeing it work, seeing it in action is critical there.
And he also admitted his mistakes. So he was like assuming people understood records management terms. And that's what he assumed people had understood. So he adapted his language, reset assumptions, got feedback, and then improved on it. So it's becoming more and more simple for people to understand.
Yeah, and just reflecting on the curve thing as well, is that, you do a course, you feel ready, then real life happens. And that's where that imposter syndrome kicks in and you think, oh, I know nothing. So I think Ali talked about that in her podcast.
Yeah. And then her CEO said something that just freed her. You're never going to know everything.
Nice, nice. How soothing is that sentence? How grounding and soothing is that sentence? Because,
Mm.
that expectation to always be the oracle is quite heavy and crushing. So that's beautiful. I love that.
And what I loved is that she reframed the expertise. Not knowing everything doesn't mean you're incompetent. It means you build trusted connections so you know where to get the answers. And that's leadership to me, really.
Yeah, it's leadership, and it's also that humility. So, what makes people trust us more is that, we become the person who owns it, and we're humble in the same process. So, yeah, that's where we.
Nice. And one of the other themes, and I think it's really important to acknowledge within this podcast, is the mental health of information leaders, because our
Mm,
job's absolutely huge. From a data protection officer, everyone else is urgent. becomes your urgent, and actually that's not correct, and that shouldn't be the way. Obviously, if a data breach, you need to deal with it, but there are some elements of boundaries and mental health. We can talk about all these roles, but we should also be talking about that mental load that is on that person.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a bit of a mix there. We've got a big load of work, but also some of the information that we are dealing with is quite sensitive, and it can be quite triggering, some of the stuff that we're dealing with. So, thinking about here in New Zealand, the abuse and state care records inquiry. So I think Ellie talked about the funnel metaphor, and that's going to stay with me because I really enjoyed that. So the output stays the same as the input that changes. So it's not, if too much is pouring in, then that funnel's going to overflow. So we have to manage the inflow, we need to delegate, we need to prioritize, and we need to ask for help as well when we need it, not just feel like we're battling that alone.
And she modeled boundaries beautifully, I thought, because when I
Mm.
asked her about her biggest mental health challenge, she actually said to me, I'm not sharing that publicly because her children's stories are part of hers. And I actually thought that that was a really sensational thing to do, certainly on a podcast as well.
Wow, that's pretty powerful, eh? Human and vulnerable without oversharing. So I guess the key thing there is, vulnerability isn't exposure. If you're vulnerable, it doesn't mean that you have to expose everything.
And I recall that both Georgina Lee's and Emma's podcast also talked about switching off being quite hard, especially when you
Mm.
work from home, because when you're in the office, you travel to and from. So you kind of get that switch off period where you're at home, you're straight out of the door and then straight into home life. And the temptation is to open the laptop on Sunday afternoon, and the mental load of wanting the organization to do the right thing and having to accept that you just can't force it to happen.
Yeah, that's that whole thing around, that saying of pick your battles, right? So I always see picking your battles as wisdom. Otherwise, you're going to burn out. You're going to be fighting everything constantly every day. So pick your battles, and yeah, stay calm.
And I think pick your battles kind of just takes me on to the last kind of segment of this, is that communication, right? So we information leaders always talk about the jargon or the kind of throw technology at us, and we kind of talk about that. But actually, when we're communicating to senior managers and end users, we should be using really simple language so they can actually understand and buy in to what you're asking them to do. And just kind of an example for that, if you're talking about an EDRMS implementation, you should actually be saying, we're implementing a software that will help you find documents 80% quicker, right? So there's a benefit to that as well. And it's just that change of communication. And that has come up consistently through all the podcasts that I've done this year.
Yeah, if I recall one of your masterclasses as well that I've joined you on, Jackie, there were a few people on that masterclass, and we went through some of that language change. And you could see the people sort of get that aha moment. So communication comes up everywhere. We have to change our language depending on the audience. So that's one powerful thing that I learned. IT wants the detail, but our users just want to know how it affects their day.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I talked to Jenny and Charlotte in one of the podcasts about the color communication profiles. So the DISC model, which is, 100% I'd highly recommend that. And Surrounded by Idiots, which is a sensational book that kind of takes the color profiles into sort of really relatable and simple understanding that you can actually start to work out how you need to communicate with shareholders and end users as well, just to kind of get those communication flowing so you can actually then start to get things driving through the business.
Yeah, that kind of ties into that whole storytelling thing as well. People remember powerful stories. They don't remember, a conversation that I had with them about policy clause 4.7. They're going to remember a story about the day that this happened in the organization. And by the way, it was about a policy. So storytelling, 100%.
Yeah. And I think people underestimate storytelling, but I'm really seeing that kind of drive through the change within our industry. And all the podcasts have really kind of brought out the storytelling. I think the one that I did with Tash Whittaker, that was a sensational. She's some really, really good kind of relatable stories that you can take back. And then Rowena Fielding. She also had some good ones, isn't there? And I would always say that when you're talking about your roles, you should use stories to make it more human, and understandable and relatable. And you'll get much more buy-in rather than carrot and stick, because they just connect to your heart and they make learning stick.
Yeah, 100%. It's that heart connection that's important. And that's about being human and just bringing that human into what we do.
Yeah. Okay, Andrea. So if we had to summarize the themes from these conversations in one message today, what would that
Mhm.
be for you?
I think that's pretty easy. You don't thrive alone. Build the community, ask for help, share the knowledge, share it generously as well, and have the courage to stay human in a role that pressures you to be a machine.
Amazing, Andrea. That is more than one thing, though. Pick one of those. Whilst I agree with all of them, that's more than one thing.
Okay, so no, just say no. That would be another thing as well. So having that no in the mix.
Nice, nice. And I just want to add to that your job is to help people to do the right thing in a way that they can actually understand and adapt. So it's very much key for information leaders to have the essential skills to be able to deliver that. So we all know the compliance, we all know the law, but actually it's that other piece that we're now missing that we really need to focus on and have a look in 2026.
Awesome. So, Jackie, 1 year of podcasts. What do you want for its birthday?
Honestly, I want more people to realize that information leaders and information management, data protection isn't boring, it's brave. There's so many neurodiverse information leaders within our industry, and this podcast has very much brought that out. And I really want more young people to come into the profession because, I had a podcast with Karis Hardy, and she's very kind of new into the profession, but you don't get that exposure until you're at university and you have to pick it. And if you don't pick it, you don't know if you like it or not. So there's like a
Yeah.
big gap. That would be one of the things that I would want to do. And I'm going to say second message in terms of your people self is that just kind of be bold, be brave, and be beautiful, and kind of bring your authentic self to just do you. And you will be enough to get what you need to get done.
Nice. I love that. That's all good stuff. And I guess, people feeling seen in their roles as well. Maybe a tiny cake, shaped like a filing cabinet or, something along those lines, Jackie.
A cake shaped like a filing cabinet is now a non-negotiable.
I'll get baking and I'll bring the sprinkles, retention labeled sprinkles, obviously.
Okay, perfect. And to anyone listening, thank you so much. Truly, this podcast exists because of the community around it. I've really enjoyed this year of episodes, so please subscribe, share it with someone in your world who needs it. And if you want professional development that actually feels human and useful, head over to the Leadership Through Data website.
Nice. And if you're new here, go back and listen to the earlier episodes. You'll hear yourself in them as they go through.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for joining me, Andrea.
No problem. Always. Happy first birthday, podcast.
Happy first birthday, Journals of the Information Entrepreneur. Thank you for listening to the Journals of the Information Entrepreneur with me, Jacqueline Stockwell. I hope you found this episode inspiring and helpful and have some takeaway tips that can be useful to you. If you liked this episode, please like, review and share it with your friends. Your support helps us reach more information leaders to stay inspired and listen to great content. Want to test out your strengths and weaknesses and measure it against our Empower framework? Please complete the scorecard. It's a great way to improve and evaluate your skills. You can find the scorecard at the end of the description of this podcast. Stay tuned for a new podcast every Thursday, and remember to be bold, be brave and be beautiful.